Beneath the cobblestones of every ancient city lies a second, secret map. For centuries, while daily life unfolded in the sun, a hidden world of tunnels and canals pulsed with forbidden traffic just out of sight. This is the story of 25 ingenious smuggling routes concealed under the streets of history's greatest metropolises. By the end, you will never look at an old city the same way again, seeing instead the brilliant engineering and desperate cunning that operated in the shadows. How did an empire's sacred sewer become a contraband highway, and what treasures moved silently under a fortress's mighty walls? The answers reveal a startling truth about human ingenuity. What does it say about us that our greatest constructions often have a hidden twin built for secrecy? The grandeur of Rome was built on visible triumphs, but its secrets flowed just beneath the sandals of its citizens. While the Forum bustled with senators and merchants, a different kind of commerce navigated the darkness below. The Cloaca Maxima began as a marvel of public health, a monumental sewer channeling water and waste to the Tiber River. Its arched brick passages were so vast a man could stand within them. This very scale, designed for civic good, became its greatest vulnerability. Authorities found it impossible to watch every entrance and exit of such an extensive network. Under the cloak of night, small, flat-bottomed boats would slip into these waterways. They did not carry waste but forbidden cargo, banned religious tokens from persecuted cults, stolen temple offerings. Even precious metals could be moved silently from one district to another, completely bypassing the watchful eyes at the city gates. The flowing water itself provided a perfect alibi, masking sounds and carrying away any trace of passage. Here was a profound lesson in subterfuge. The smugglers did not need to build their own secret world. They simply borrowed the empire's own magnificent infrastructure, turning a symbol of Roman order into a channel for its subversion. This ingenious repurposing reveals a truth that will echo through every story to come. When a society builds something massive and essential, it often accidentally builds a shadow corridor alongside it. The next hidden network, however, was not a repurposed public work, but a space designed from the start for discretion, lying beneath the heart of a provincial capital. While Rome's sewers were a world of flowing water, other hidden spaces were designed for stillness and shadow. In the southern province of Gaul, the city of Arles thrived as a commercial hub. Its forum was a symphony of open-air trade, a sanctioned marketplace where the empire collected its due on every transaction. But directly below this stage of legitimate commerce lay a silent, subterranean counterpart. Builders constructed vast, vaulted galleries called a Cryptoporticus. These were not basements in the modern sense, but elegant, arched passageways built partially underground. Their primary purpose was brilliantly practical. By burying these spaces, engineers created a naturally cool and stable environment, ideal for storing the city's vital supplies of grain and amphorae of precious wine. This was a public service, a testament to Roman ingenuity in preserving food. Yet, the very features that made the Cryptoporticus a perfect warehouse also made it a perfect smuggling den. The constant, cool temperature that protected legitimate goods also protected contraband. Merchants looking to avoid the crushing weight of imperial taxes found they could move their untaxed wine or grain through these dimly lit galleries. Archaeological work reveals these were not isolated chambers. Passageways connected, creating a kind of underground street system that could allow goods to be shifted from a riverside dock to a merchant's cellar without ever seeing the light of day or the eyes of a tax collector. It presents a fascinating contradiction. The Cryptoporticus was a foundation of civic order, literally supporting the grand buildings above it. Yet within its sturdy Roman arches, the very concept of that order was quietly undermined. The empire's own tools for stability became instruments for evasion. This dance between visible power and invisible subversion would find an even more essential stage, where the hidden routes were not about preserving goods, but preserving life itself in a parched landscape. But the need to move unseen was not confined to grand cities. In the vast, sun-baked expanses of ancient Persia, survival itself depended on a hidden marvel. A network of underground canals known as Qanats snaked beneath the desert. These were not mere ditches, but monumental feats of engineering, hand-dug by teams of workers over generations. They tapped into distant mountain aquifers, channeling precious water through gently sloping tunnels for dozens of miles to feed thirsty cities and irrigate fields. The Qanat was a public lifeline, a sacred piece of infrastructure. Its construction was a closely guarded science, with access shafts placed at regular intervals for maintenance, plunging straight down into the dark, cool channel below. This very design, however, created a perfect clandestine highway. The tunnels were linear, predictable, and entirely concealed from the surface. For those who knew the routes and the rhythm of the maintenance crews, they offered a secret path across otherwise open and monitored terrain. Silks from the east, spices from the south, or other goods meant to avoid official border tariffs could be moved through these damp, narrow passages. A smuggler carrying a bundle could walk for miles unseen, emerging from a shaft far from prying eyes. Perhaps the most ingenious protection for this illicit traffic was its utter necessity. Local rulers and governors were deeply reluctant to police the Qanats aggressively. Tampering with them risked damaging the water flow, which could lead to drought, famine, and unrest. A smuggler in the Qanat wasn't just hiding from the law, they were hiding behind the most vital interest of the state itself. This represents a masterful exploitation of a societal vulnerability. The smugglers understood that some structures are too important to disturb, weaving their shadow trade into the very arteries of civilization. This deep understanding of how to use essential systems as a shield would be echoed centuries later, beneath cities where the hidden commodity wasn't water, but faith and power. Beneath the golden domes and bustling forums of Constantinople, the earth was hollowed out into a hidden, inverted cathedral. The Byzantines did not just build upwards towards heaven, but downwards into the dark, creating hundreds of vast underground cisterns to secure their most precious resource, water. The most famous, the Basilica cistern, feels less like a tank and more like a submerged palace. Forested with endless rows of reclaimed columns, its vaulted ceiling mirrored perfectly in the still, black water below. This was public utility on a monumental scale, a masterpiece of engineering meant to withstand any siege. But in that perpetual twilight, another kind of traffic found its way. The same water that guaranteed the city's life could also conceal its secrets. Small, flat-bottomed boats could glide silently between the pillars, far from the sunlit streets above. During periods of intense religious conflict, when certain texts or icons were banned, or when political fortunes shifted overnight, these damp chambers became perfect transfer points. A chest of precious metals, a bundle of heretical manuscripts, or a fugitive scholar could be moved from one access point to another, their passage muffled by the echoing drip of water. Guards were certainly stationed at major entrances, yet the challenge was immense. Constantinople had not one, but countless such reservoirs, a sprawling, dark maze beneath the entire city. Patrolling them all was simply impossible. This allowed a different kind of current to flow alongside the water, a steady trickle of forbidden knowledge and untaxed wealth. Here, in the heart of a devout Christian empire, the architecture of survival was seamlessly co-opted for secrecy. It presents a powerful duality, where the state's greatest public works also hosted its most private, subversive transactions. This blending of the sacred and the covert would find a starkly different expression in the tunnels of another fortified island, built not by an emperor but by an order of warrior monks. The island of Malta is a fortress carved from limestone. In the 16th century, the Knights of St. John faced an existential threat, a vast Ottoman fleet laying siege to their stronghold. Their survival depended not just on the towering walls above, but on the hidden world they excavated below. They created a hypogeum, a subterranean complex of tunnels, chambers, and storage rooms deep beneath the city of Valletta. This was military engineering at its most pragmatic. Under constant bombardment, moving troops, food, and ammunition across the open streets was a death sentence. Their network of tunnels became a sanctioned smuggling route, a clandestine logistics line for their own survival. Men and supplies could flow invisibly from one bastion to another, emerging where least expected to repel an attack. This was the noble, desperate use of the hidden passage. But history rarely leaves such tools untouched once the immediate danger passes. After the siege was broken and the knights secured their victory, the strict control of a small island created new opportunities. The very tunnels that once carried sacks of grain for defenders could now transport other, more discreet cargo. Scholars suggest these same passages later facilitated a black market in religious relics, smuggled antiquities, and goods that bypassed the order's own strict trade regulations. What began as a lifeline for a military order evolved into a shadow economy. This pattern is profound, where infrastructure built for one urgent purpose is almost inevitably repurposed for another, often contrary to its original intent. It reveals a truth about human ingenuity, that a tunnel dug for salvation can later serve for subterfuge. This seamless transition from survival to secrecy would be mirrored thousands of miles away, beneath a city where the earth itself was far softer, and the motivations were not martial but deeply spiritual. Beneath the towering pyramid of the moon, the earth holds a different kind of mystery. The Avenue of the Dead, the grand central axis of Teotihuacan, was not the only processional route in this ancient city. Underneath it, carved through soft volcanic rock, archaeologists have discovered a profound secret, a tunnel running from the heart of the Ciudadela complex to the very center of the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. This was no simple construction trench. This was a carefully engineered, hidden passage, sealed for over 1,700 years. Recent laser scans and meticulous excavations have revealed its true nature, a subterranean world adorned with symbolic offerings. Think of it not as a back alley but as a sacred conduit. Through this tunnel, the priestly elite could move unseen. They transported objects of immense ritual power, bundles of rare quetzal feathers, shimmering green jade, and sacred powders, all away from the public eye. This control over the flow of the divine was the ultimate source of their authority. By monopolizing the movement of these materials, they controlled the very ceremony itself, staging public spectacles that seemed to summon magic from the earth. The line between spiritual duty and economic monopoly here is invisible. The sacred feathers and jade were also incredibly valuable trade goods. By controlling their secret circulation beneath the city, the elite maintained a hidden economy, reinforcing their status not just as spiritual leaders, but as the sole brokers of the city's most prized commodities. This is hidden control in its purest form, using the earth itself to create a narrative of power that the people walking the Avenue of the Dead above could never fully see. It was architecture as illusion, a physical secret that upheld a social order. This ancient concept of using tunnels to enforce control would find a starkly different expression centuries later, not in the service of sun gods, but in the desperate defense of faith within the stone walls of an English manor house. The stone giants of Carcassonne stand guard over the French countryside, their double walls an emblem of impenetrable medieval might. Yet within those massive fortifications lay a clever vulnerability, a secret woven into the very fabric of its defense. They were called poterns, small, unassuming doors tucked into the base of a tower or hidden in a curtain wall. To a besieging army, they were nearly invisible. To the castle's defenders, they were a tactical lifeline, a way to launch surprise attacks or receive covert reinforcements. But once the immediate threat of siege passed, these same doors took on a second, quieter life. The local merchants and farmers knew them well. A heavily taxed barrel of wine or a sack of precious salt could move through a potern under cover of night, bypassing the lord's official gate and his burdensome tolls. The guard who looked the other way for a coin might have been the same soldier who relied on that passage during wartime. This was the perfect smuggling system, hiding in plain sight within architecture designed for security. It created a persistent grey market where the community's survival and its profit were intertwined, all facilitated by the castle's own hidden blueprint. This blurring of lines, where a feature for protection becomes a tool for subversion, shows us that the design of a space can never fully control how people use it. From these fortified gates, our journey into the hidden takes a dramatic turn in scale, leaving behind single doors for entire cities carved from the living rock. The poterns of Carcassonne offered a hidden door in a wall, but in the heart of Turkey, smugglers and refugees did not need a door. They had an entire hidden world. The soft volcanic rock of Cappadocia allowed for something far more ambitious than a tunnel: the excavation of complete subterranean cities. Places like Derinkuyu descend over 200 feet underground, a labyrinth of living quarters, chapels, wine presses, and stables, all connected by miles of narrow corridors. Initially, these spaces offered sanctuary, a place for early Christian communities to retreat from persecution, but their design made them ideal for another purpose entirely. The very features that allowed thousands to live in hiding: the concealed ventilation shafts, the massive rolling stone doors, the intricate networks that could be sealed off from within, also created the ultimate secure warehouse. For merchants moving silks and spices along the Silk Road, these underground cities were a perfect way to avoid the heavy tariffs imposed by the Byzantine Empire. A caravan could ostensibly stop in the region while its most valuable goods vanished beneath the earth, transferred through these secret levels to a different buyer entirely, all without ever appearing on an official ledger. The scale was their greatest defense. No tax collector could possibly monitor every entrance, and the local communities who knew the passages were often complicit, benefiting from the trade. This was not a temporary hideout, but a permanent, alternative infrastructure built into the landscape itself. It turned the ground beneath your feet into a vault, a highway, and a sanctuary all at once. This monumental approach to concealment stands in stark contrast to the hidden networks that would later develop in a city known for light and surface grandeur, where the tunnels were not carved for permanence, but born from a much darker urban necessity. Beneath the elegant boulevards of 18th century Paris, a different kind of city was taking shape. The catacombs began as a practical, if macabre, solution. The cemeteries above ground were overwhelmed, posing a serious public health challenge, so the remains from centuries of Parisians were respectfully transferred into the old, abandoned limestone quarries that snaked beneath the city. The result was a silent, echoing empire of bones, stacked neatly along miles of dark passageways. But this solemn resting place would soon pulse with a very different kind of life. For those wishing to operate outside the watchful eyes of the monarchy, this unmapped labyrinth was a gift. Police spies and informants filled the cafes and streets, making any open discussion of reform or revolution incredibly dangerous. Down below, however, the rules dissolved. The confusing, often unstable tunnels became a haven for ideological smuggling. Banned books and incendiary pamphlets, printed on hidden presses, could be moved from hand to hand in the absolute dark. Bags of salt or tobacco, avoiding the king's heavy taxes, changed ownership by the flicker of a lantern. The catacombs provided more than just a hidden route. they offered a secret meeting hall, a storage vault, and an escape corridor all in one. This was a profound transformation. A space dedicated to memory and loss was repurposed for the subversion of present power. The smuggling here was not just about goods but about ideas, the most dangerous contraband of all. This shift from economic to ideological secrecy marks a pivotal point in our journey, where the hidden path becomes a line of resistance. And while Parisian radicals used tunnels to challenge authority across the English Channel, a damp and foggy landscape provided the perfect natural cover for a smuggling operation built on pure profit. A thick, persistent sea fog could transform the Romney Marsh into a smuggler's paradise. This vast, low-lying wetland on England's southern coast was a natural maze of shifting waterways and soggy ground, nearly impossible for government revenue officers to patrol effectively. For the local families who knew its secrets, however, the marsh was a perfect covert highway. They did not just use the landscape, they improved upon it. A network of hand-dug tunnels connected isolated farmhouses, taverns, and even the cellars of parish churches to hidden points along the coast. When a ship signaled from the fog, its cargo of untaxed tea, brandy, and tobacco would be unloaded swiftly onto small boats. These goods would then vanish into the watery channels, only to reappear deep inland, stored beneath the flagstones of a seemingly respectable inn. The integration was seamless. A vicar might preach upstairs while a fortune in contraband sat below in the church crypt. This was not a hidden world separate from the community, it was the community. Nearly everyone, from the farmer to the innkeeper, had a role to play, whether through active participation or a willing silence. The difficult terrain that defined the marsh created a unique social contract, binding people together through shared profit and a common distrust of distant tax collectors. Here, the smuggling route was more than a physical passage. It was a social thread woven directly into the fabric of daily life, making the illicit trade resilient for generations. This deep entanglement of crime and community would find a powerful echo across the Atlantic, where the very earth held a different kind of treasure, and the tunnels served a far more oppressive master. Deep beneath the sun-baked hills of Guanajuato, the earth itself was a treasure vault. The Spanish crown knew it, imposing the quinto real, the royal fifth, a tax claiming 20% of all silver extracted. But where there is a system of control, a shadow system inevitably takes root. The very mines that generated unimaginable wealth for the empire became the perfect vehicle for stealing a portion of it back. Miners and wealthy hacienda owners, familiar with every twist and turn of the privately owned shafts, began to map a second, secret purpose onto the existing labyrinth. Officially registered silver would travel to the surface for stamping and taxation. Meanwhile, an untold amount of ore took a different journey, diverted into side tunnels and forgotten galleries. This clandestine network, carved by pickaxe and greed, allowed the metal to flow unseen, bypassing the king's officials entirely. Some passages reportedly exited directly into the basements of grand estates, where the untaxed silver could be smelted in private or hidden until it could be safely introduced into the black market. But it was not just precious metal that traveled these hidden paths. The tunnels also served as sanctuaries for a different kind of treasure. Indigenous artifacts, religious items, and cultural objects targeted for confiscation by colonial authorities could be secreted away in these deep, dry chambers, protecting a heritage under threat. This represents a profound irony. The infrastructure of extraction, built to feed a distant empire, was subverted to drain its wealth and preserve the very culture it sought to overwrite. The tunnels of Guanajuato show us that the most effective smuggling route is often the one that already exists, repurposed by those who know its secrets best. This direct conversion of industrial passages for covert ends highlights a brutal economic truth. The machinery of profit will always create its own dark counterpart. Yet, not all subterranean networks begin with such a singular purpose. Our next descent leads us into a far messier, more organic underworld, born from the desperate and growing needs of a modern city itself. The silver mines of Guanajuato represent a calculated, hidden theft from an established system. But in the sprawling heart of the British Empire, a new kind of underground world was being born not from secrecy, but from a very public crisis. Above ground, Victorian London was a marvel of industry and empire. Below, it was a festering, lethal swamp. For decades, human waste and industrial runoff flowed openly through streets and into the Thames, creating a stench so powerful it was called the Great Stink, a public health disaster that Parliament could no longer ignore. The brilliant engineer Joseph Bazalgette was tasked with a monumental solution: to build over 1,000 miles of intercepting sewers that would channel the city's filth away from its homes and river. His work saved countless lives and became a symbol of modern urban engineering. Yet, in doing so, he unknowingly engineered something else entirely. He created the largest, most sophisticated clandestine highway the city's underworld had ever seen. Before Bazalgette's intervention, London's subterranean landscape was a chaotic patchwork of crumbling medieval drains, private cesspits, and narrow brick tunnels. The new system replaced this with a vast, interconnected network of large, walkable brick corridors with a constant flow of water to carry boats. For the first time, one could traverse significant distances beneath the city entirely unseen. This was an opportunity instantly seized upon by those who lived in the shadows. The new sewers became the preferred route for moving stolen goods from a burglary in Mayfair to a fence in Wieliczka, far from the bobbies now patrolling the better-lit streets above. Counterfeit coiners used the damp, secluded chambers near outflow pipes as perfect hidden mints, the sound of their work masked by the rush of water. Perhaps most chillingly, the sewers offered a grim transit route for individuals themselves, whether it was a fugitive escaping the law or something more sinister, like the so-called resurrection men transporting their illicit cargo. This presents a profound irony of progress. The same engineering that sought to cleanse the city and impose a new order from above simultaneously constructed a disorderly realm beneath it. The authorities would occasionally stage raids into the depths, but the maze was too extensive, the darkness too complete. The sewers symbolized a perpetual game, a dark mirror to the society above. For every new police procedure or neighborhood watch, the underworld had a new, damp corridor in which to disappear. This environment of constant, flowing concealment represents the ultimate evolution of the urban smuggling route, not a single tunnel dug in secret, but an entire alternative infrastructure gifted by the authorities themselves. It proves that solving one problem often simply moves another out of sight. And while this cat-and-mouse game was played for profit and crime in London, the same principles of hidden movement would soon be applied with far higher, more desperate stakes in a landscape defined not by waste but by warfare. The dark, flowing sewers of London were a realm of illicit commerce, but in the dense jungles of Vietnam, the very same concept of moving unseen was refined into an instrument of sheer survival and strategy. The Ku Kai tunnels are not ancient, but they are perhaps the most complete embodiment of the hidden route ever devised. This was not a single passage for contraband, but an entire subterranean city engineered for war. Stretching for over 120 miles in some areas, the network included living quarters, field hospitals, weapon workshops, and command centers, all buried several layers deep beneath the forest floor. The primary purpose was logistical, to smuggle fighters, intelligence, weapons, and food supplies across a landscape dominated by opposing forces. But the method was pure, ancient cunning, amplified to an incredible degree. Entrance holes were meticulously camouflaged with leaves and soil, often hidden beneath termite mounds or inside flooded rice paddy dikes. The tunnels themselves were narrow, sometimes only wide enough for a single person to crawl through, a deliberate design to prevent larger soldiers from entering. The air was thin and hot, the darkness absolute, and at key points the passages were lined with simple, devastating traps, pungy stakes, falling doors, concealed pits, turning the act of pursuit into a lethal gamble. For the individuals who lived and moved within them, the tunnels were a grueling reality. Historians note the immense hardship endured, from tropical illnesses and insect infestations to the constant psychological strain of confinement and the threat of discovery. Yet this hidden network achieved what surface forces could not. It allowed a smaller, less equipped force to appear and disappear at will, to launch surprise attacks and then vanish back into the earth, controlling the tempo of engagement. The Qanat tunnels demonstrate the ultimate evolution of the smuggler's path. Here, the commodity being moved was not silver or silk, but the means of conflict itself and the people waging it. The earth was no longer just a hiding place. It was transformed into a defensive weapon, a communication line, and a strategic asset. This shifts the motivation from profit or evasion to a stark, collective struggle for existence. It shows that when the stakes are the highest, human ingenuity in concealment reaches its most sophisticated and desperate form. And while born from conflict, this mastery of the underground would find a far more peaceful and flavorful application in the limestone cellars of a famous wine region. While the tunnels of war served a stark purpose, other hidden routes were built for the discreet pleasures of commerce. Venice, the city of shimmering light and water, was also a city of profound shadows. Everyone knows its grand canals, but the true lifeblood of its trade often flowed through a quieter, more secretive network. Beneath the ornate facades of its palazzos, a second, submerged city existed. Here, private water doors, known as portes d'arquois, opened directly from the canal into the basement storage rooms of merchant homes. This was not a secret tunnel in the traditional sense, but an ingenious architectural loophole. A merchant could receive a shipment of silks from the east or spices from Alexandria directly into his fondoco, his warehouse home, without ever unloading a crate in the public Rialto market. On the surface, this was simple convenience, a way to protect goods from the weather and theft, but it also provided a perfect screen for evasion. The Venetian Republic maintained strict controls and taxes on trade through its official channels. Guilds dictated who could sell what, and the state took its share. Yet, how could an inspector possibly monitor every single private water door, especially under the cover of night? The gentle lap of water against stone masked the sound of oars as a small, laden boat slipped into a narrow side canal and vanished into a basement. The luxury goods that made Venice famous, damask, pepper, pearls, could easily be diverted, their quantities underreported, or their origins obscured to avoid heavy duties. This system was so effective because it was woven into the city's very fabric. Smuggling wasn't an anomaly in Venice. It was a silent partner to legitimate trade, facilitated by the design of the buildings themselves. The water door was a symbol of mercantile power and privacy, a blurry line between honest business and cunning circumvention. It shows how a city built on water mastered the art of hiding in plain sight, using its most famous feature as the perfect cloak for clandestine delivery. This integration of secrecy into architecture for commercial gain finds a remarkable parallel in a very different environment, where the goal was not to hide luxury, but to preserve the very means of life itself. Far from the damp canals of Venice, beneath the sun-baked earth of the pre-Saharan desert, communities mastered a different kind of subterranean strategy. In ancient Berber cities like Catacombs, survival itself depended on outsmarting the climate. The ingenious solution was the matmora, a type of underground granary carved deep into the dry, cool earth. These were not mere storage pits, but sophisticated vaults, often bottles shaped with narrow openings that sealed tightly. Inside, the stable temperature and lack of light kept grain edible for years, safe from the scorching heat above and from the eyes of potential raiders. This was public infrastructure at its most vital, a communal insurance policy against famine. Yet, this system of collective security naturally gave rise to a shadow economy. In times of plenty, a family might have a surplus. In times of embargo, perhaps imposed by a distant ruler, or during a local conflict, the official trade of grain could be banned or heavily taxed. The matmoras, hidden and communally managed, presented a perfect opportunity. A surplus could be discreetly moved from one family's chamber to another's, or sold to a trader from a neighboring oasis, all without ever appearing on a surface market. The very architecture designed for preservation now facilitated evasion. This was smuggling born not from greed but from resilience. It was the covert trade of sustenance, where the contraband was literal life itself: barley, wheat, dates. The tunnels and chambers connecting these granaries, or the secretive movements under cover of night, formed one of the most fundamental smuggling networks imaginable. It highlights how the line between public good and private subterfuge can blur when a community's survival is at stake. This pragmatic adaptation of hidden spaces for basic needs stands in stark contrast to the next evolution of these secret passages, where what was being hidden was not food for the body, but sustenance for the soul, under the severe pressures of religious conflict. A different kind of desperation shaped the hidden architecture of Tudor England. In the grand stone manor houses of the 16th and 17th centuries, the stakes of discovery were not measured in coins, but in lives. Following King Henry VIII's break from Rome, the practice of Catholicism became a dangerous act of defiance. Priests who ministered to the faithful were hunted, and the families who sheltered them risked everything. In response, a secret craft emerged, dedicated to building invisibility into the very fabric of a home. These were the priest holes, tiny, ingeniously concealed chambers hidden behind wall panels, beneath floorboards, or within the thickness of chimneys. The master of this dark art was a lay brother named Nicholas Owen. A small man physically, he would travel from house to house under the guise of a carpenter, often working alone at night. His hiding places were masterpieces of misdirection. A sliding panel might be hidden within elaborate wood carving. A compartment could be accessed only by removing a specific stone in a fireplace, or by stepping on a floorboard in a precise sequence that triggered a counterweight. Some holes were built into the spaces between walls, with an entrance so narrow a grown man would have to contort himself to enter, sometimes for days on end while searches raged overhead. The intention was not comfort but absolute secrecy. These spaces were more than just shelters, they became clandestine routes themselves. A priest hole might connect to a narrow escape tunnel leading to a nearby wood or a waiting horse, allowing a hunted individual to vanish from a sealed house. But these secret arteries carried more than people. The same compartments that hid a priest were also used to smuggle the physical elements of forbidden worship. Elaborate chalices, leather-bound missals printed abroad, and bottles of sacramental wine, all illegal, could be stored and transported within these architectural illusions. The act of smuggling here was layered with profound meaning. It was a direct challenge to state authority, driven by deep spiritual conviction and the mortal need for communal survival. This adds a solemn moral weight to the deception, transforming the hidden passage from a tool of commerce into a sanctuary and a lifeline for an entire belief system. It reminds us that the drive to create secret routes can spring from the deepest wells of human identity, a stark contrast to the motivations we find when we descend next into a breathtaking world of carved salt, where evasion was driven by a different, more tangible kind of hunger. Deep beneath the earth in southern Poland lies a cathedral of salt. The Wieliczka salt mine is a world of astonishing beauty, with grand ballrooms, intricate sculptures, and even a fully carved chapel, all glittering from the walls of what was once a vast industrial operation. But long before it became an UNESCO heritage site drawing tourists, this labyrinth served a far more desperate purpose. For centuries, salt was not just a seasoning, it was white gold, a critical preservative for food and a source of immense wealth for the kingdoms that controlled it. The Polish crown imposed a heavy salt tax, and the official yield from mines like Wieliczka was meticulously monitored and claimed by the state. Yet, the very nature of the mine defied total control. It was a dark, sprawling, three-dimensional maze descending over 1,000 feet, with hundreds of miles of tunnels branching off into the gloom. This impossible geography created a perfect shadow economy. Miners working in perpetual semi-darkness with only candlelight knew the unofficial passages better than any tax inspector ever could. They developed a system of secret extraction, taking small, untraceable amounts of salt from the walls during their shift. This illicit harvest was then hidden in clothing or within tools, to be smuggled out not through some external tunnel, but through the mine's own official exits, right under the noses of guards. The contraband salt would then enter a local black market, providing crucial extra income for the workers and cheaper salt for the community. This was smuggling turned inward. The route wasn't a separate hidden path to move external goods. It was the very veins of the industry itself, corrupted for personal survival. The miners were not bringing something in. They were secretly diverting the primary product out, exploiting their unique knowledge of a kingdom built underground. It presents a fascinating paradox. The workers who were the engine of the state's wealth became the architects of its systematic loss, all within the same glittering, subterranean walls. This internal subterfuge, born from the marriage of heavy taxation and intimate knowledge, stands in sharp relief to our next example, where hidden routes were not carved by human hands for industry, but by nature itself, and used for a trade as old as civilization. The Nile River was the pulsing heart of ancient Nubia, a liquid highway for caravans carrying ivory, ebony, and precious incense north toward Egypt and the Mediterranean. Along its banks near the city of Dongola, the cliffs themselves were carved into solemn resting places for the elite. These rock-cut tombs, silent and imposing, stood as monuments to eternity. But for the living merchants navigating the complex taxes imposed by local kingdoms, these sacred sites presented a unique and pragmatic opportunity. Located strategically away from the bustling river ports and official tax stations, the tombs offered something invaluable: discreet, secure, and dry storage. A caravan laden with goods approaching a tax checkpoint could first divert to these cliffs. There, they could secretly offload a portion of their most valuable cargo, perhaps the finest tusks or the rarest resins, and conceal it within the cool, dark chambers. After paying duties on a now lighter, less valuable load, they could later retrieve their hidden treasure and continue their journey, their profits significantly padded by the evasion. This was a calculated repurposing of the sacred for the secular, a temporary conversion of a space meant for the departed into a warehouse for the living's wealth. It reveals a fascinating historical pragmatism. The spiritual significance of the tombs was respected enough not to be desecrated, but it was also flexible enough to be bypassed when economic incentive called. The drive to protect profit quietly overruled traditional boundaries, proving that even spaces dedicated to memory and ceremony could be woven into the shadow logistics of trade. This blurring of lines between the holy and the commercial finds a strange echo far across the world, in a desert where ancient lines drawn on the surface may have hidden a very different kind of movement below. While the vast geoglyphs of Nazca captured the sky's attention, a quieter, more vital network thrived beneath the desert floor. Known as puquios, these were not simple wells but intricate subterranean aqueducts, spiraling filtration shafts connected to miles of underground canals that tapped into distant groundwater. They were the lifeblood of the Nazca people, transforming arid valleys into fertile gardens. But the very sophistication of this system invites a compelling question. These channels formed linear, concealed pathways through the earth, connecting separate valleys across a landscape that was otherwise open and exposed. Could they have served a second, hidden purpose? Some researchers propose that beyond carrying water, the puquios may have offered a discreet route for moving valuable goods. In a society without a written script, controlling the flow of information and commodities was a matter of profound power. Prized materials like coca leaves, used in ritual, or rare metals for crafting could have been transported through these cool, dark tunnels, unseen by rival groups or outside traders. The engineering knowledge required to build and maintain the puquios was itself a form of controlled secret, held by a skilled few. This potential dual use speaks to a fundamental truth. From the very dawn of complex societies, essential infrastructure, whether a tomb, a canal, or a water source, rarely had just one function. Its existence created opportunity, and human ingenuity is quick to find secondary paths within a primary design. The possibility that the Nazca moved both water and wealth through the same hidden veins connects their story to a much older tradition of covert movement, a tradition that was already ancient in the deserts of Persia and would find elaborate expression beneath the crowded holy city of Jerusalem. The stones of Jerusalem's old city have absorbed the footsteps of countless pilgrims, soldiers, and merchants, yet the most intriguing journeys may have happened out of sight. Beneath the sacred sites and bustling markets lies a second shadow city, a tangle of tunnels, ancient drainage canals, and forgotten gates. For centuries, these hidden arteries served a vital, clandestine purpose. During sieges, when the gates above were sealed or controlled by hostile forces, these passages became lifelines. Crusader knights, medieval merchants, and everyday citizens used them to move food, weapons, and intelligence between the sealed quarters. The famous Western Wall tunnels, which expose the massive foundational stones of the Temple Mount, also reveal how these spaces functioned. They weren't just archaeological wonders, they were practical routes. A person could, in theory, move from one part of the city to another entirely underground, avoiding the checkpoints and conflicts that raged on the surface. This represents a profound idea. The past itself, the accumulated layers of construction, became a toolkit for survival. When a Herodian drainage channel from the time of Jesus is used in the Middle Ages to bypass a blockade, history is no longer just a record. It is an active physical network repurposed to overcome the barriers of the present. The very act of digging to uncover antiquity could, and did, reveal new secret paths. This clever use of deep history as a strategic asset shows a unique form of smuggling, where the contraband was often simply a person or a message seeking safe passage. It demonstrates how, in a city layered with conflict, the ground beneath could become the only neutral territory, a silent witness to the enduring human need to connect, to communicate, and to move freely when the world above says you cannot. This tangible link between ancient ruins and immediate need creates a powerful bridge to another city, where dark, abandoned vaults beneath a bridge fostered a very different kind of hidden economy. Edinburgh's South Bridge was a symbol of modern progress when it opened in the late 1700s, but the bridge was not solid earth. Its 19 stone arches were hollow, creating a series of dark, low-ceilinged chambers intended for workshops and storage. Almost immediately, these spaces proved too damp and dark for legitimate trade. As the prosperous city grew upward, these vaults were simply sealed off and forgotten by the world above. Yet they were far from empty. A complete shadow society moved in. Smugglers used the labyrinth to store untaxed tea, tobacco, and French brandy. Illicit distillers, avoiding the heavy taxes on Scotch whiskey, set up operations in the perpetual gloom. The vaults became a perfect, unmapped exchange for stolen goods, with entrances hidden in the cellars of seemingly respectable taverns and tenements. This created a stark physical divide. The wealthy and law-abiding citizens walked the elegant royal mile, utterly unaware of the bustling black market directly beneath their feet. It was a city literally built on its own secrets, a powerful metaphor for how societies often ignore the hidden systems that operate in their shadows. The damp air and confined passages of Edinburgh speak to a temporary, opportunistic use of space, carved out not for permanence but for convenience and concealment. This idea of hidden networks facilitating movement away from oppression takes on a far more profound and urgent meaning as we cross the Atlantic, where tunnels and secret rooms were not used for commerce, but for something much more sacred: liberty. The vaults of Edinburgh were built for commerce and abandoned to crime, but some hidden passages were constructed for a purpose that transcended profit entirely. In the decades before the American Civil War, a different kind of network operated in absolute secrecy. It was called the Underground Railroad, and while it was not a literal railroad nor always underground, it relied on the same principles of hidden movement we have seen throughout history. This was a web of clandestine routes, safe houses, and courageous individuals dedicated to one goal: guiding people seeking freedom out of bondage and toward liberty in the northern states and Canada. Here, the contraband was human life, and the stakes were the highest imaginable. The routes themselves were a masterpiece of covert logistics. A journey might begin with a coded message, a lantern placed in a specific window, or the quiet hum of a certain spiritual. Songs like "Follow the Drinking Gourd" contained hidden maps of the stars. Travel was conducted under the cover of darkness, through forests and across rivers, but the most critical nodes were the safe houses, often private homes or churches, where ingenious hiding places were built into the very architecture. False walls in attics, trapdoors beneath beds or kitchen hearths, and tunnels leading from barns to nearby woods were all engineered to provide invisible sanctuary. These spaces were not ancient ruins repurposed, but deliberately crafted responses to a grave injustice, built with a profound understanding of risk and a deep compassion. This network redefines our entire concept of a smuggling route. In every previous example, from Roman sewers to Scottish whiskey vaults, the driving forces were economic gain, tax evasion, or political subversion. The Underground Railroad was fueled by a moral imperative. The conductors and station masters, both black and white, operated out of a commitment to human dignity, knowing that discovery could mean financial ruin, violence, or imprisonment. This elevates the hidden passage from a tool of commerce to a lifeline of human rights. It reminds us that the same architectural cunning used to hide salt or silk could, in different hands, become an instrument of liberation. The tunnels and hideaways were physical manifestations of a powerful defiance, a collective refusal to accept a cruel status quo. This profound counterpoint casts all the earlier routes in a new light. It asks us to consider not just the ingenuity of hidden movement, but the purpose behind it. The legacy of the Underground Railroad is not one of shadowy economics, but of immense courage and a resilient hope that carved paths to freedom through a landscape of oppression. It stands as a testament to the fact that the human drive to move unseen can be an act of profound love and resistance, a far cry from the damp cellars used for hiding barrels of untaxed wine. Yet even in that world of luxury, the same principles of concealment were at play, applied to a commodity that was delicate, valuable, and meant to be savored. Yet the pursuit of freedom stands in stark contrast to another powerful human motivation, the pursuit of pleasure. In the wine country of France, the dark, cool earth was used not for liberation, but for the clandestine trade of a celebrated luxury. Beneath the rolling vineyards of Bordeaux, a different kind of secret network took shape, carved from the very limestone that gave the region its character. Long before the French Revolution, the kingdom's tax system, controlled by a powerful private consortium known as the firm Arles, placed a heavy burden on goods moving between provinces. For wine producers, this meant a significant portion of their precious vintage could be claimed by tax collectors before it ever reached a thirsty customer. The solution lay not in the fields above, but in the quarries below. For centuries, stone had been excavated to build the charming chateaux and city walls of the region. This left behind vast, labyrinthine caves and tunnels, naturally perfect for aging wine due to their constant, cool temperature and high humidity. These cellars or caves became the heart of a silent, aromatic rebellion. A winemaker might declare only a portion of his barrels to the tax inspectors, while the rest, the very best vintages, perhaps were rolled into hidden chambers deep within the maze. Some tunnels were said to connect neighboring estates, allowing for the untaxed transfer of barrels between sympathetic producers, completely bypassing the official roads and checkpoints. Imagine the scene: a solitary worker with a lantern, guiding a barrel through a silent, pitch-black passage that smelled of damp stone and oak, moving a fortune in future wine under the feet of the authorities. This was smuggling appealing directly to the senses, a defiance measured in bouquets and tannins. It demonstrates how the desire for luxury, for the finer things in life, can inspire the same level of ingenuity as the struggle for survival or freedom. The very infrastructure of quality, the cellars essential for producing a great Bordeaux, became the infrastructure of evasion. This clever circumvention was about more than just keeping money. It was about preserving the full fruits of one's labor, a sentiment that would soon boil over into revolution on the streets above. And just as wine represented a tangible, liquid treasure to be hidden, another, more ethereal commodity also required secret passageways for its preservation, the fragile treasure of knowledge itself. While wine was hidden from the tax collector's ledger, a far more dangerous contraband was being concealed from the censor's fire: ideas. In the silent scriptoriums of medieval monasteries, a different kind of preservation was underway, one that risked everything to safeguard the written word. During times of intense religious upheaval or political crackdowns, when certain books were ordered destroyed, the monastic community faced a terrible choice. They could comply and see centuries of knowledge, including classical philosophy, scientific texts, and alternative religious interpretations, vanish into ash. Or they could deceive. The solution often lay in the architecture of faith itself. Monks constructed secret compartments behind altars, built libraries with false walls, and even repurposed old drainage tunnels or crypts to create hidden archives. A hollowed-out column, a cavity beneath a flagstone, a forgotten passage leading from the cellar into the nearby forest, each became a sanctuary for parchment and vellum. This was smuggling with the highest possible stakes, not for profit but for the future of thought itself. Imagine a solitary monk, his hands steady not with fear but with purpose, placing a fragile manuscript into a stone cavity, knowing it might not be retrieved for generations. The hidden route here was not a path for moving goods, but a place for making them disappear, a temporal bridge to a more tolerant future. This act transformed the tunnel from a tool of commerce into a vessel for memory, ensuring that voices deemed dangerous or heretical in one era could speak again in another. It reminds us that the most profound things we bury are not treasures of gold, but treasures of the mind, waiting for the light to find them once more. And this legacy of hidden networks, from sacred scrolls to silver bars, has never truly left us. It has simply changed form, embedding itself into the folklore and foundations of our modern world. The impulse to hide things never really disappears, it simply evolves. The physical legacy of these ancient smuggling routes is often right under our noses, literally woven into the infrastructure of modern cities. When engineers first mapped paths for subway lines, sewer expansions, or utility conduits, they frequently discovered they were not the first to dig there. In many cases, they found it easier to follow the old, stable tunnels of forgotten crypts, sealed-up escape routes, or repurposed aqueducts, unknowingly laying modern cables and rails atop ancient secrets. This means the hidden paths of the past often became the foundational blueprints for the circulatory systems of our present, a literal underground inheritance. But their impact extends far beyond concrete and clay pipes. These buried networks have taken root in our collective imagination, sprouting a forest of modern urban legends. Nearly every historic city boasts tales of secret passages beneath old pubs, tunnels connecting mansions to the river, or forgotten corridors under government buildings. While many such stories are exaggerations, they are almost always sparked by a kernel of truth, a strange blocked-off archway in a cellar, an unexplained draft in a basement, or a historical record of a sealed tunnel. This folklore persists because the idea captivates us. It fuels countless stories in books and films, from phantom lairs to secret rebel bases, speaking to a deep, universal curiosity about the world we cannot see. We are drawn to the notion that the surface of a city is merely a facade, and that its true, complex history is layered in the dark, waiting to be rediscovered. This enduring fascination is not just about mystery for mystery's sake. It points to something fundamental in how we understand power, freedom, and community. That persistent curiosity about what lies beneath our feet taps into something much deeper than simple intrigue. These stories of hidden routes captivate us because they are built on universal human themes. There is the undeniable thrill of the forbidden, the childlike excitement of discovering a secret door. We are drawn to the cleverness required to circumvent authority, to outwit a system using nothing but ingenuity and intimate knowledge of the landscape. It is the romance of possessing secret knowledge, of seeing the hidden blueprint of a city that everyone else walks over blindly. And perhaps most powerfully, these tunnels offer a tangible, almost physical connection to the past. To stand in a cool, damp passage and know that centuries ago, someone else stood here in the dark, moving something precious, is to feel history not as a dry fact but as a living, breathing presence. Ultimately, these routes speak to a profound and deep-seated desire for freedom and agency. They represent the human spirit finding a way, carving a path where none officially exists. The motivation behind that drive varies dramatically, from the greed of tax evasion to the sacred duty of protecting faith, from the desperate need for survival during conflict to the courageous act of leading others to liberty. This range reminds us that history is never a single narrative. It is not merely the story recorded in official ledgers and celebrated in monuments under the sun. It is also the shadow history, the story of what was whispered, what was hidden, and what was moved in silence through the dark. To understand any civilization fully, we must acknowledge this essential duality, the constant interplay between the ordered world above and the secret world below. It is in that hidden layer where we often find the most human stories of resistance, adaptation, and hope. That shadow history is a testament to the enduring human spirit. From the flowing sewers of Rome to the liberation tunnels of the Underground Railroad, our journey has uncovered a world defined by ingenuity, desperation, and quiet resilience. These were not just holes in the ground, they were sophisticated, deliberate responses to the great pressures of their eras, whether that was crushing taxation, religious persecution, the horrors of war, or simple human greed. Each tunnel and hidden canal reflects a core tension of its time, a silent argument against the established order above. They teach us a crucial lesson about how we see our world. The map of any city, of any civilization, is always twofold. There is the official plan, drawn by rulers and engineers, with its straight avenues and public squares. And then there is the secret one, etched in whispers and practiced in darkness, a network of shortcuts and hideaways that tells the story of those who lived within, and often in spite of, that official design. This hidden blueprint is just as vital to understanding our past, so the next time you walk the streets of an ancient town, or even a modern city built on old bones, let your mind wander downward. Beneath the pavement, under the foundations, a hidden world is waiting to tell its story. It is a story of cleverness and risk, of survival, and sometimes of profound courage. If these glimpses into the underground have captivated you, there are so many more layers of history left to explore. Consider subscribing for more journeys into the past's forgotten corners. And we would love to hear from you. Which of these ingenious hidden routes did you find the most compelling? Share your thoughts in the comments below.